Anthony Grassi here for College.town at the 2026 NCAA Convention. Happy to sit down with D2 SAAC Chair Avery Hellmuth.
Yeah.
Avery, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So we'll start with SAAC. What is top of mind for the committee now?
Great question. We set goals every July, and we just revisited those earlier this week, and we decided that the work's not done, and so we'll continue that work in the spring semester. So those two goals are communication, just reinforcing that whatever we do doesn't matter if campus and conference SAACs don't hear about it, and a lot of our work is to empower them with resources, and so just strengthening our communication patterns, as well as exploring, is there another way we can spread that information to student athletes? And we've especially leaned into social media in the last few years because we know they're there, maybe not as much as their email inbox. So communication, and then also just emphasizing community engagement efforts on Division II campuses and conferences, whether that's with our official D2 partners or not. We're always asking, what are you doing? We're sharing those ideas because community service and engagement is something that we really prioritize. So those are our two goals.
As the National SAAC tries to stay engaged with all student athletes in Division II around the country, as a bunch of issues continue to, maybe a bunch of topics continue to become top of mind, what changes do you think you as the committee can make to continue to have as much upfront engagement with all of those student athletes, given they got A, have a lot going on, and B, the challenge in maybe tapping into all those individuals, as many as possible?
Yeah, and just to speak to the busyness of the student athlete life, I've seen research that will come out soon that student athletes spend an average of time on school and athletics that's worth 2 full-time jobs. And so I lived that, and I was resonating with that data. And so we know that it's hard to get in the room with those student athletes, but as much as we can face-to-face, just build connection that then can lead to working on something together. And so I'm a firm believer in relationships being the cornerstone to leadership. And so just continuing to emphasize our relationships with the athletes that we represent in our conferences. And each conference has a retreat once a year. That's a legislative piece that's part of SAAC. And so just leveraging that opportunity where national SAAC representatives can connect with their people that they represent and build a relationship that's not built on business too, because that's just as important when you're trying to communicate with someone, that they know who you are, not just what you're trying to tell them. And so the in-person piece to me is super helpful, and that's where I've been able to connect in the best way with my conference. So yeah, in person is better than online, and we're trying to work on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned the community engagement piece a moment ago. I'm curious, from your time at Oklahoma Baptist, what the impact the partnerships with Make-A-Wish, Team Impact, Special Olympics have all had on you personally and your fellow student athletes.
Absolutely. It's really hard to hear a story from one of those organizations without getting emotional, and I tend to be a crier, so sometimes some tears leak out, but those organizations do amazing work. This year alone, this last academic year, we raised $260,000 for Make-A-Wish from Division II member institutions, and that number is just incredible. And just being able to visit someone in a hospital, a children's hospital, and see what their life is like, and know that, yes, I have demands and my life is hard, but wow, it's not like that. And so as much as we impact those people, they impact us. And those partnerships are strong and a cornerstone to the work that we do.
On some of the things that are happening here in DC as we sit here, what has been the impact you've seen on the growth of women's sports across, as we see more women's sports become championship sports, we see more women's sports added to the emerging sport category? What is the impact that you think that has had?
Yeah. My first convention was in 2024 when we voted to put stunt in the emerging sports category, and now we're voting them out into National Collegiate Championship. And so that's just an exciting trajectory that I've gotten to experience. I was, of course, a female athlete, and now I'm a woman working in sports. And so it's just been such a privilege to be a part of the Everyone Watches Women's Sports movement that we've seen. And my mom was a collegiate athlete and in the 90s, and just hearing some of those stories and being able to have a different lived experience and then watch that opportunity grow for other female athletes like me in different sports has been incredible. And I know that's something that we're proud of, not just as a division, but as an association.
Sitting here in DC, we sit not far from Congress. What has your level of engagement been with members of Congress, with your fellow SAAC members, with members of Congress, your fellow student athletes, with their local Congress people as you push for the changes that are the best for the division and the association?
Yeah, it's been a high level. We're working very hard to contact our members of Congress and encourage others to do so too. We've created templates for letters and other resources for student athletes to get involved, whether that's through writing an email or letter or even just posting something on social media, just explaining what their life is like. I think to me, one of the biggest obstacles is that people in Congress may not understand what the daily life of a student athlete is like. And if all they see is what they see on ESPN, that's not the D2 student athlete experience. And so being able to advocate for not just what we want, but just so that they understand what we're living, so that they can understand why we want what we want. And 4 national SAAC reps from Division II actually got the chance to go to Capitol Hill maybe yesterday or the day before. The days are blurring together in this week, but I got to be one of those, and it was an incredible experience just getting to sit down with members of Congress and talk about the issues and how it impacts us, and just be a part of civic duty and government processes. It's such a privilege, and so we're doing everything we can to raise student athlete engagement with Congress, but it's already been incredible to see student athletes across the country mobilize and write letters and make phone calls and make visits to district offices, and we're hoping that administrators continue to get involved as well. I think the student athlete voice is important, but administrators may have personal connections to some Congress members, and so just trying to do whatever we can to help the division and the association pass much needed legislation in the SCORE Act.
As you met with members of Congress, I'm curious, given your experience as a student athlete, you also currently work as the director of compliance at Oklahoma Baptist. You have you're in all sides of it, from the athletic side. What was the feedback that you got from the members that you met with, and what were maybe some of the things that, as you were explaining to them what it's like to be a Division II student athlete and the nuances that they may not see given what's on ESPN, that you saw maybe the light bulb start to click?
That's a good question. It depends on what member of Congress you're speaking to, because they all have different beliefs, and that's an important part of how our country runs. But I think that the Division II student athlete life is a true student athlete life. It's still very elite athletics, very elite academics, and spending time on both of those things and trying to also have a normal life outside of all of those things. And we get to do that. And so I think that the level of resources is the main difference between Division I and D2. And so just explaining, like, my athletic trainer covers 3 sports, or my coach is also our Title IX coordinator, and just explaining how departments function in Division II, and just to get a little bit specific with the potential of an employment model, I don't know very many Division II athletic departments that would survive that. Scholarship is kind of funny money. It's not real dollars most of the time, and so when you get into having to pay wages, provide benefits, it sounds good to be paid for the blood, sweat, and tears, but at the end of the day, our athletic departments can't afford that, and we are receiving scholarship, and there is ability to earn NIL, and so I would rather maintain student athlete status where I'm not fired for a bad performance. My coach is not my boss. That's such a different dynamic. And now we see coaches as one of the most influential voices in someone's life, and to me, that's mentorship. And so maintaining the status quo of the student athlete life is so important, and if we move to an employment model, most Division II athletic departments would go under.
You mentioned the administrator's perspective a moment ago. The audience you're speaking to is primarily athletic administrators. What would your message be to them as SAAC pushes for more congressional engagement, the message that they should be having or sending to their local Congress people, how they should be advocating as well?
Absolutely. I mean, they're not student athletes, but they speak with those people every day. And the administrator experience is obviously important as well. Administrators are doing incredible work to support student athletes, to win games, to provide entertainment in local communities. Sports is such a uniting factor in our society, and I love sports, and so we need to maintain, what we're able to provide. And I think as administrators, there's such an opportunity to empower student athletes to get involved, but also, our work will change drastically if this legislation is not enacted, and so now is the time to get involved. Yeah.
You mentioned NIL a minute ago as well. What do you see, given, again, your seat, former student athlete, also the director of compliance at a Division II school, what is the maybe landscape you see for NIL right now?
It's a confusing one. There are over 30 state laws that vary, and again, that's why we need the SCORE Act. We need a federal standard. But in Division II, I would say the most NIL that I've seen is gift in kind. And so I don't know many student athletes that are receiving payments or signing a deal with a company where they're receiving money. It's more like, I got a deal with Body Armor, and I get the body armor that I like to drink in exchange for posting on social media about it. And that's a great way to help student athletes out. I mean, I know other deals with local restaurants, like I can eat at this local restaurant for free if I post about it on social media or whatever the deal might be. And so there's not as much high dollar NIL happening in Division II. And I don't know that that's wrong. I think sometimes this is kind of what I see as a good part of NIL, right? Like the point of NIL is that student athletes can leverage their name, image, and likeness and benefit from that. And so it is a benefit to receive a product that you enjoy using.
Do you see a potential concern where there are certain schools obviously that have more resources than
Absolutely.
others? Do you see that as a potential concern? Maybe the not best side of NIL, where there's you're
Sure.
trading service for product, dollars, et cetera.
Yeah, I know that right now we're reviewing, what does it look like to have a third party affiliated with an institution, provide NIL, and there's been a lot of membership feedback opportunities for the governance structure to look at. Our legislation committee is still reviewing all of that feedback, and so, I mean, there will always be differences between institutions, whether that's public or private or student body size, and so I don't know how deep that concern is. I mean, it's a free market, and so some people will earn more than others, and if that becomes like an extreme disparity, then yeah, that's a competitive advantage. But at this point, I don't really see that playing out too highly from my perspective.
As we sit here, we're 12 hours probably from session starting, the business session starting on Friday morning. The two proposals that SAAC opposed were the added fifth-year eligibility and the change in the football championship date. As we sit here right now, that there's a referral for the fifth year to go back to the governance structure. I'm curious what your thought on those two proposals is and the student athlete's perspective on why opposing those two pieces of legislation is.
Yeah, I love that question. We work really hard to collect student athlete feedback from across the division. It's an extensive process every fall that our vice chair facilitates, so thankfully it's off my plate. But we collect not just votes, but comments from student athletes all throughout Division II, and those are very telling. So for the 5 seasons proposal, we saw a lot of concerns from student athletes. And this is not an exhaustive list, but primarily worried about losing red shirts and medical hardships and other waiver opportunities. That's the key piece in this proposal ultimately. And we've seen that student athletes really value that as part of their experience, whether that's because a freshman might come in not ready to compete at the speed or strength that is required at the next level. Or just, if you get hurt in minute 1 of the first game of the season, and that counts as using a season, our student athletes say they don't like that. And so that's a major concern. There's also concerns about financial aid. Most institutions only apply non-athletic aid for 8 semesters. And so if you take that 5th season, you're losing out on that aid. And there's many other reasons, but ultimately, our student athletes that were educated understood some of the consequences of this proposal, but we also saw a lot of student athletes unsure about what they were voting on. And so to kind of tie back to the referral, we would support the referral because back to the executive board and back to our governance structure, because we believe that student athletes were not all fully educated and not all able to provide an informed opinion on this proposal. And so giving a time extension for that education process would be really helpful, whether that means that student athletes support or oppose the proposal. We want to see what student athletes truly think when they understand everything that's at play. And so just looking at those comments directly from student athletes and seeing like, okay, yeah, this was really hard to understand, even for a lot of administrators. We've been talking about this a lot recently. And so, we really rely on our student athlete feedback, and we collected it differently for the football date formula because that's not a legislative proposal. And we were asked to provide feedback on that earlier this year. And so we actually conducted a survey of Division II football student athletes as well as coaches and administrators. And we reviewed that data in April of 2025. And we saw strong support for the status quo and not moving the football championship in Division II. And we provided all of that feedback, and that's why this has come through a different way than just a normal proposal, but we stand by that student-athlete data. Shout out to our NCAA research team. They do not get enough credit, and they are a very gifted team, and they've helped us collect that data. And so, again, everything we do is based off of the student-athlete voice, and so what we hear from student-athletes is what we execute on, and that's what we've heard.
Avery, thank you for joining me here in D.C.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.